I never thought I'd be writing a post like this. Tom and I met during our junior year of college at a mutual friend's party. I was immediately drawn to his easy smile and the way he could make anyone laugh. We started dating a few months later, and it felt like we were meant to be together. We had so much in common, both of us were driven, ambitious, and dreamed of making it big in our respective fields. After graduation, we both landed entry-level jobs in the city. I started as a marketing associate at a tech startup, while Tom got a position as a junior analyst at Brennan & Associates, a small but reputable financial firm. We were so excited to start our careers and build a life together. We'd spend our evenings comparing notes on our day, sharing our successes and frustrations. Tom would tell me about the intricacies of financial analysis, and I'd share the latest marketing trends I was learning. A year into our jobs, Tom proposed. It was a perfect moment. He took me to the rooftop restaurant where we had our first date and got down on one knee just as the sun was setting over the city skyline. I said yes without hesitation, and we spent the next year planning our wedding while juggling our increasingly demanding careers. The wedding was beautiful, a small, intimate affair with our closest friends and family. Tom's best man, his older brother Mike, gave a touching speech about how he'd never seen his little brother so happy and how he knew we were perfect for each other. If only I'd known then how Mike would later be complicit in Tom's deception. After the honeymoon, we threw ourselves back into our careers with renewed vigor. I was determined to climb the corporate ladder, and Tom seemed equally motivated. He'd come home excited about new projects he was working on, talking about complex financial models and big clients. I didn't always understand the details, but I loved seeing him so passionate about his work. 2 years into our marriage, Tom came home one day practically bursting with excitement. He announced that he'd been promoted to senior analyst, complete with a corner office and a significant pay raise. I was thrilled for him. We went out to celebrate that night, toasting to his success and our bright future. With our combined incomes, we were able to move out of our tiny starter apartment and into a lovely condo in a trendy neighborhood. We started talking about our future more seriously, discussing when we might start a family, whether we should buy a house in the suburbs. Tom even mentioned that he was on track to make partner at his firm within a few years. Life seemed perfect. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but overall, I felt like we were living the dream. I was advancing in my own career, recently promoted to marketing manager, and Tom's star seemed to be continually rising at his firm. About 6 months ago, Tom started working longer hours. He'd come home late, often distracted and tired. He explained that he was working on a huge deal that could cement his path to partnership. I tried to be understanding, even when he started traveling more frequently for work. He'd fly out to New York or Chicago for important meetings, sometimes gone for days at a time. I started feeling a bit neglected, but I reminded myself that this was temporary. Once he made partner, things would settle down. In the meantime, I threw myself into my own work and tried to be the supportive wife I thought he needed. Last week, everything changed. My friend Sarah, who works at a competing financial firm, called me out of the blue. She sounded hesitant, almost nervous, as she asked if everything was okay with Tom's job. I was confused. As far as I knew, things were going great. I told her about his impending partnership. There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again. She told me that her colleague Jack had run into Tom at a coffee shop downtown the day before. Tom was dressed casually in khakis and a polo shirt, not his usual suit. When Jack asked about work, Tom had apparently gotten flustered and quickly left. I brushed it off, assuring Sarah that there must be a reasonable explanation. But her words niggled at the back of my mind. That evening, when Tom got home, I casually asked about his day. He launched into a detailed story about a stressful client meeting and a conference call with the New York office. I don't know what came over me, but I suddenly blurted out that Sarah had mentioned Jack seeing him at a coffee shop. The change in Tom's demeanor was instant and alarming. His face went pale, and he started stammering, finally admitting that he'd taken a long lunch break. Something about his reaction set off alarm bells in my head. I started asking more questions about the deals he was working on and his recent trips. Tom got defensive, accusing me of not trusting him. We argued for a while before he stormed out, saying he needed some air. While he was gone, a horrible suspicion started to form in my mind. I went to our home office and started looking through our financial documents. I realized I hadn't actually seen any of Tom's pay stubs or work documentation in years. He always said he handled all the finances because he was good with numbers. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone and called Brennan & Associates. I asked to speak with Tom, and the receptionist politely informed me that no one by that name worked there. Confused, I explained that he was a senior analyst, had been with the company for years. The receptionist apologized but firmly stated that they had no senior analyst positions and no employee named Tom. In a panic, I started calling the numbers of Tom's work friends and colleagues that I had saved in my phone. None of them had heard of him. I even tried the main offices in New York and Chicago that he claimed to visit regularly. No one knew who he was. By the time Tom came home late that night, I was sitting in our dark living room, surrounded by papers, my mind reeling. I confronted him with what I'd learned. For a moment, he tried to deny it, but then he broke down crying. The truth, when it finally came out, was devastating. Tom had been fired from Brennan and Associates 3 years ago. He'd made a serious error in a financial model that cost the company a major client. Instead of telling me, he'd been too ashamed. He pretended everything was fine, getting a low-paying data entry job at a small local business, but telling me he was still at the financial firm. All the stories about deals and promotions were lies. The business trips were fiction. He'd stay with his brother Mike in another city to keep up the ruse. Mike had reluctantly agreed to cover for him, thinking it would just be temporary until Tom found a new job. I was in complete shock. Our whole life together for the past 3 years had been based on lies. All our plans for the future were built on a fantasy. I couldn't believe the man I loved and trusted completely had deceived me for so long. Tom begged me to forgive him. He said he'd been scared to tell me the truth at first, and then the lie just kept growing. He promised to come clean about everything and said we could work through this together. I told him I needed time to process everything. I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister. I'm completely lost and don't know what to do. How can I ever trust him again? Should I give him another chance, or is this betrayal too big to overcome? The life I thought I had has crumbled around me, and I'm left wondering if anything was ever real. Update: when it's been about a month since my world turned upside down, and I'm still reeling from the aftershocks of Tom's deception. I'm staying at my sister's place, trying to make sense of the past few years of my life and figure out where to go from here. After my initial post, I decided to do a deep dive into our finances. What I discovered was even more horrifying than I could have imagined. Not only had Tom been lying about his job, but he'd also been hiding massive debt from me. He'd taken out multiple credit cards in my name and maxed them out. He'd also drained our joint savings account, the one we'd been building up for a down payment on the house, and taken loans against our cars. When I confronted Tom about this financial mess, he broke down again. This time, he admitted to something I never saw coming: he developed a gambling addiction over the past few years. At first, it was just a way to cope with the stress of losing his job and maintaining his lies. But it quickly spiraled out of control. He'd been using the credit cards and loans to fund his habit, always believing he was just one big win away from solving all our problems. I was beyond furious. Not only had he lied about his job and our financial situation, but he'd also stolen my identity and potentially ruined my credit. The man I thought I knew, the man I'd built my life with, suddenly felt like a stranger. Tom swore he'd get help for his gambling addiction. He promised he'd find a way to repay all the debt. He said he'd do anything to save our marriage. But how could I believe anything he said anymore? I've been replaying our entire relationship in my mind, wondering if there were signs I missed. Were there moments when I should have realized something was off? I remember times when Tom seemed stressed or distant, but I always attributed it to work pressure. Now I wonder if those were moments when the weight of his lies was particularly heavy. My sister has been my rock through all of this. She's let me cry on her shoulder, listened to me rant and rave, and helped me start to pick up the pieces of my life. She's also been gently pushing me to think about my future and what I want to do next. I hired a lawyer to help me understand my options. The revelation about the fraudulent credit cards opened up a whole new can of worms. My lawyer advised me that I might need to file a police report about the identity theft to protect myself financially. The thought of potentially pressing charges against my own husband makes me sick to my stomach, but I know I need to protect myself. Tom's family has been calling and texting nonstop since I left. His parents are begging me to give him another chance, saying that addiction is a disease and I should stand by my husband. His brother Mike called to apologize for his role in the deception, saying he never imagined it would go on for so long or spiral so out of control. I understand that addiction is a serious issue, and part of me feels guilty for not realizing Tom was struggling. But they don't seem to understand the depth of his deception and the damage he's done. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was years of calculated lies that have left me questioning everything about our relationship. Some days, I feel strong and determined to move forward on my own. Other days, I find myself looking at old photos of Tom and me, remembering the good times we shared, and wondering if there's any way to salvage our relationship. Then I remind myself of all the lies, and I feel angry and betrayed all over again. I'm trying to focus on practical steps forward. I've frozen my credit, set up fraud alerts, and am working with the credit card companies to dispute the fraudulent charges. It's a long and frustrating process, but it feels good to be taking action. I've also thrown myself into my work, grateful for the distraction and the stability it provides. My boss has been understanding about my situation and has even hinted at a possible promotion in the near future. It's a small bright spot in the midst of all this chaos. As for Tom, he's been alternating between desperate pleas for forgiveness and angry outbursts. Last week, he showed up at my sister's house unannounced, crying and begging me to come home. When I refused to speak to him, he camped out on the front lawn for 2 days before my sister finally called the police to remove him. I'm trying to limit my contact with him to discussions about practical matters through our lawyers. Every time I see him or hear his voice, it sends me into an emotional tailspin. One moment I'm furious, the next I'm grieving for the future we'd planned together. My friends have been incredibly supportive, rallying around me and offering help in any way they can. Sarah, whose innocent phone call set this whole revelation in motion, has been particularly guilt-ridden. She keeps apologizing for ruining my marriage, no matter how many times I tell her she did the right thing. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm trying to focus on rebuilding my life and figuring out who I am outside of my relationship with Tom. It's scary and overwhelming, but I know I need to do this for myself. I still don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive Tom, or if our marriage can survive this betrayal. But I do know that I need to prioritize my own well-being and protect myself going forward. Whatever happens, I'm determined to come out of this stronger. Update 2: It's been 3 months since my last update, and the situation with Tom has continued to evolve in ways I never expected. The divorce proceedings are underway, and it's been a messy, emotionally draining process. Tom initially contested the divorce, claiming that his lies and financial fraud were symptoms of his gambling addiction, and that he deserved a chance to make things right. His lawyer tried to argue that the debt should be considered marital debt since it was accrued during our marriage. It was infuriating to sit in mediation sessions and listen to them try to justify years of deception. Thankfully, my lawyer was able to provide evidence that Tom had acted maliciously in hiding the debt and taking out fraudulent credit cards in my name. We had documentation of him forging my signature and lying on credit applications. The judge ruled in my favor, making Tom solely responsible for the debt he incurred. In a surprising turn of events, Tom's brother Mike reached out to me about a month ago. He asked to meet in person, and against my better judgment, I agreed. Over coffee, Mike confessed that he'd known about Tom's job loss and gambling problem for years. He'd been covering for Tom, letting him stay at his place during the fake business trips, and even lending him money occasionally. Mike's revelation was another blow. I felt betrayed not just by Tom, but by his entire family who had known the truth and helped him lie to me for years. Mike tried to explain that he believed he was helping Tom get back on his feet, that he never imagined the deception would go on for so long. He said he tried to convince Tom to come clean many times but always gave in when Tom begged him not to say anything. At the end of our meeting, Mike offered to testify on my behalf if needed in the divorce proceedings. He said he wanted to make amends for his role in hurting me. I'm still processing how I feel about his offer. On the financial front, I've made some progress in rebuilding my life. The credit card companies have agreed to remove the fraudulent charges from my credit report, though my credit score took a significant hit. I've been working extra hours at my job, taking on additional projects to prove my worth. My hard work paid off with a small promotion, which has helped me start to rebuild my savings. I've moved out of my sister's place and into a small apartment of my own. It's not much, just a studio in a less desirable part of town, but it feels good to have a space that's all mine, free from the lies and deception of my past. I've been slowly furnishing it with secondhand finds, trying to create a cozy home on a tight budget. The hardest part of all of this has been dealing with the emotional fallout. I've been struggling with trust issues, finding it hard to take anyone at their word. I catch myself doubting even my closest friends sometimes, wondering if they're hiding something from me. I've started seeing a counselor to work through these feelings, and while it's been helping, I know it's going to be a long process. My relationship with Tom's family has become increasingly strained. His parents continue to pressure me to give him another chance, sending long emails about the power of forgiveness and the importance of marriage vows. I've had to block their numbers to maintain my sanity. It hurts to cut ties with people who were like second parents to me for so long, but I know it's necessary for my mental health. As for Tom himself, his behavior has become increasingly erratic. Some days he sends me long, rambling apologies, swearing he's changed and begging for another chance. Other days, he lashes out, blaming me for ruining his life and threatening to drag out the divorce unless I agree to his terms. His mood swings are exhausting and only reinforce my decision to end our marriage. Last week, I ran into one of Tom's former co-workers from Brennan and Associates at a coffee shop. She recognized me and awkwardly asked how Tom was doing. When I explained that we were divorcing, she seemed uncomfortable and quickly made an excuse to leave. It made me wonder how much his old colleagues knew about his firing and whether anyone had ever considered telling me the truth. Despite all the chaos and heartbreak, there have been moments of growth and even joy over the past few months. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I've started taking a photography class at the local community center, rediscovering a passion I'd put aside years ago. It's a small thing, but capturing moments of beauty in the world around me has been surprisingly healing. My sister suggested I join a support group for people dealing with divorce, and while I was skeptical at first, it's been incredibly helpful. Hearing other people's stories and sharing my own has made me feel less alone in this struggle. It's also given me perspective. As terrible as my situation is, I'm grateful that Tom and I didn't have children to complicate things further. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. Some days are harder than others, but I'm slowly starting to see a future for myself beyond this mess. I'm not ready to think about dating or new relationships yet, but I'm no longer spending every night crying over old photos and wondering what might have been. The divorce proceedings are ongoing, and there's still a lot to be settled. But I'm hopeful that soon, this painful chapter of my life will be behind me, and I can start fresh. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm relieved to say that the divorce is finally finalized. The past half year has been a roller coaster of emotions and legal battles, but it's over at last. In the end, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. Tom is responsible for all the debt he incurred, including the fraudulent credit cards. He's also been ordered to pay me a significant sum in damages for the financial and emotional distress he caused. I'm not holding my breath on or seeing that money, but the ruling itself feels like vindication. Tom didn't take the ruling well. He had a breakdown in the courtroom, shouting that I was ruining his life and that he'd never be able to repay the money. The judge had to threaten him with contempt of court before he calmed down. It was a surreal and honestly frightening moment, seeing this man I once loved become a stranger before my eyes. The day after the hearing, Tom's brother Mike called me. He sounded worried and upset as he told me that Tom had disappeared. Apparently, Tom had fled town the night before the final hearing, leaving only a cryptic note saying he couldn't face the consequences of his actions. Mike had already contacted the police, as skipping town violates the terms of Tom's bail for the identity theft charges. I'm still processing how I feel about Tom's disappearance. Part of me is angry that he's once again running from his responsibilities. Another part feels an odd sense of relief that I won't have to see him or deal with his emotional outbursts anymore. Mostly, I just feel sad for the man I thought I knew and the life we might have had if things had been different. As for me, I'm slowly but surely putting my life back together. My credit score is gradually improving, and I've managed to save up a decent emergency fund. The promotion I mentioned in my last update has opened up new opportunities at work, and I'm excited about the direction my career is taking. I've kept up with my photography class and have even started selling some of my prints at local craft fairs. It's not much money, but the creative outlet has been invaluable for my mental health. I'm thinking about starting a blog to share my photos and maybe write about my experiences, not just the divorce, but my journey of rediscovering myself. The support group I joined has become an important part of my life. I've made some good friends there, people who understand what I'm going through in a way that even my closest friends and family can't. We meet for coffee outside of the official meetings sometimes, and it's nice to have a group of people I can be completely honest with about my feelings. I'm not ready to date yet, but I'm starting to feel hopeful about the future again. This experience has taught me a lot about resilience and self-reliance. While I wouldn't wish this ordeal on anyone, I can see how it's made me stronger and more self-aware. There are still tough days, of course. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, panicked about finances or the future. I still have moments of anger and grief over the years I feel were stolen from me. But these moments are becoming less frequent and less intense. For now, I'm enjoying the peace and honesty of my new life. It may be simpler than the life I thought I had with Tom, but it's real, and that makes all the difference. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to finding out.